Looks like it. Okay, thank you very much.
So this alternative means that both.
It being after 6 o'clock for today, the posting for this meeting of the school committee, we're ready to go, and therefore I will ask all who can to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. So our agenda tonight is call to order, which we just did. Superintendent's update, which includes 3 items: the Mill Pond 2024 Mass Audubon Conservation Teacher Award, the Westborough High School National Banner Recognition, Superintendent's evaluation process and goals. Next item, item 3, is a discussion of the zero electric vehicle policy of the town as revised. And the agenda says the red line version, so maybe that is what we're going to do. Preliminary budget discussion, superintendent's goals. Next item would be citizens' requests. Item 5 is school committee reports. And item 6, the action items for a vote on the MASC resolutions, vote to endorse the zero electric vehicle policy as revised, and approval of the minutes of 9/18/24. So with that,
Great.
you're up, Al.
Thank you very much. I'm starting the evening with a couple recognitions, which is sort of some really nice news. First of all, we have a teaching team at the Mill Pond in 6th grade, Jeff Milletta and Lisa Casparello, who were awarded this Mass Audubon Conservation Teacher of the Year Award for some work they have done in project-based learning. And I got the chance to meet with them today, and I was really impressed. It's a kind of great effort. They've been engaged in this work for the past 3 years. It's a partnership with the Mass Audubon Society, but in so doing, they have partnered with any number of organizations in and around the town and individuals. They've had the tree warden come out, they've worked with the Conservation Commission, they've done all sorts of things that are very hands-on and very designed to promote a kind of high level of student engagement and investment in the classroom. And I do want to say one really nice thing about meeting with both of them is they were quick. In receiving this award, they were also quick to point out that the other teachers on the 6th grade at Mill Pond, that there are kind of different project-based opportunities throughout the 6th grade. So it's a kind of, this is their version of it. And I think they're excited for the award, but also kind of recognizing their colleagues for other efforts as well. So I look forward to kind of getting into the classroom, seeing it actually in action, but I wanted to give them a quick recognition and shout out for the work that they've done and are yet to do. I know they're really interested in thinking about, this was a grant-based opportunity, now that the grants run out, kind of what it's going to look like going forward as they sort of learn the lessons that they learned from the experience and then kind of carry them into the curriculum. The next exciting news is from the high school, where our high school is once again recognized as a Special Olympics Unified Champion School, Banner School, National Banner School, one of only 19 schools in the state. And out of those 19 schools, one of 8 that's a 4-year renewal award. So it's a pretty high honor, and really, I think, speaks to the level of inclusion and respect and the kind of overall environment at the high school. So that was one we couldn't miss an opportunity to sort of uphold. I don't have any great, I was hoping to grab some great photos, and if I can find those, I'll bring them up for you next time. So those are sort of 2 nice news updates for you. The other part of my update, I really wanted to take a little time to talk about my goals and the goal-setting process as part of the superintendent evaluation process. Most of you who have been through this before know that the superintendent evaluation kind of procedure is really set by the state, by the Department of Education. It is, it is a robust process and involves a performance standards articulated in a rubric, and it's done in public session, which is exciting for superintendents everywhere, I can tell you. I tried in this process to really put together goals that I think align with sort of the entry process for a first-time superintendent in Westwood, or in Westborough. It's the first time I think I've done that in public, but I'm going to try and avoid it.
It'll happen again and again, but
I think the focus for me this year is very, very much on learning, understanding what's here, reflecting that back so that we can kind of position ourselves to move forward thoughtfully. And the goals very, very much reflect that. So in kind of looking through, I want to talk briefly about each one. I've put them here as a discussion item for you tonight, so it's an opportunity for you all to weigh in, provide me with some sort of feedback and direction. In addition, I'm sharing it with the leadership team to hear their 2 cents, and I'll bring them back to you as a kind of final vote next time around. First and foremost is really just completion of an entry process that's thorough and thoughtful, where I get to really engage with members of the community, understand kind of what the landscape looks like, and think about how that's going to inform work going forward. So goal 1 really speaks to that, and I've talked about that here in the past, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time there. The second goal, kind of in connection with that, is really participation in the new superintendent's induction program. This is a partnership program of the state and the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. It's really designed to make sure that new superintendents get the coaching and support they need to be successful, which is going to help the school district be successful. And it's an intensive program. It involves a lot of individual coaching. It involves participation with a cohort, and also a pretty defined process in terms of thinking about entry planning, thinking about goal setting, and thinking about communication. I think a piece of it that I really appreciate, and I've spoken to this before, is it does provide a really great opportunity to network both with new superintendents throughout the state, but also very experienced, recently retired superintendents. So it kind of increases my capacity to learn from other people who are out there doing the same work. Another piece here has to do with the development and implementation of policies and practices related to cell phones and social media. And I wanted to highlight that. That's a goal really, and Tim is on the working group thinking about this area. That's something that feels more of a responsive kind of movement to something that's happening out there in the community and in the state in general. And my hope is that through the work of that group, we can come back to you with some recommendations around if there is a need for policy change, what should that policy look like? And in addition, really looking at practice. So it's the 2 parts, both policy and practice. A third piece of that is going to hinge on communication. What is it that we're doing to reach out to parents, to the wider community, to students, and really engage everybody? Because this is an issue that's not just a school-based issue, and it's not just a student-based issue. This is a thing that everyone is kind of grappling with right now. So that was goal 4. I think I skipped over goal 3. I'll go backward. No, I didn't. All right. Oh, I think I skipped over goal 2 is actually what I skipped. Thank you. So I think part of the work this year is about doing the entry plan and also trying to keep the district moving forward in its strategic priorities that have already been articulated in your 5-year strategic plan. During the summer retreat with the leadership team, that group together identified what are the sort of big picture priorities for focus this year, and we'll continue to cycle back to that work throughout the year. Those priorities are reflected in some of the school improvement plans that you saw last time, and we'll be giving you updates as we go. So part of my superintendent's updates to you in the months ahead will include kind of a touch point about where are we with different pieces of that plan. All right, and then scroll down. finally, and I think this is timely, I have been, as part of my entry plan, thinking about looking at sort of management and operations and systems. One of those areas that I think is always a good area to look at closely, keep continuously updating, is the area of school safety and security. I think I've reached out to the police and fire chiefs, and we are going to pull together, look at a process for looking at updates and best practices, and really making sure that we're keeping up with what experts in the field have to say about this. The unfortunate reality is there are now experts in this field of school safety and security, and I think that we can't do anything else unless we attend to making sure that kids stay safe at school first and foremost. So I'm very, very aware of that, take that responsibility very seriously, and it seems like an opportunity to kind of take a look in this area. One thing about this goal I will say here is that most updates related to it will probably not happen in public session, in part because some of the things that we may need to do are things that are strategies that are going to, by necessity, be outside the public purview because they have to do with safety and security. So I just want to acknowledge that up front. Some of the updates can be, but some of the work is really done so that we are taking steps to have processes that are not public processes. And I hope that makes sense. So those are kind of goals that I've articulated so far in a nutshell. As part of tonight's sort of discussion items, I'm very curious to hear any feedback. One thing I'm already thinking about in revision, based on some feedback I heard from a colleague, is in thinking about that goal around technology, cell phones, and social media, perhaps expanding that to think on the other end of what's happening in technology to include some work in considering the impact of artificial intelligence, which is ongoing and very important work as well. So I'm thinking about how to potentially weave that in. And those are sort of my highlights for this evening. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll turn it back to you.
Any comments so far? Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you for putting this together. I really do like your primary goal, which is to first just get a handle on the community and understand what the needs are and identify all the stakeholders. I think that's a really important first step. So I appreciate that. I had one question with respect to the goals reports that we received from the different schools. So after reading this, so it seems as though post-retreat is when those were put together. So your feedback was taken into consideration and it was a joint effort in putting those strategic plans together. I just want to.
In terms of the strategic plans from the school side really roll out of that bigger picture strategic priority process. So, we're in year 4 of a 5-year plan, and much of that work is kind of ongoing on the school side. The school improvement plans are really the work of school site councils in conjunction with the principals. My job is to take a look, make sure they do in fact reflect what's going on strategically at the district level. But other than that, it's a school-based process.
Okay, no, I understand that, but in terms of, they were pretty specific, I would say even some of the reports and like the high school report, there was a lot of specificity in those reports. I'm just wondering, obviously we have new eyes looking at things now,
right.
And your feedback is important. And so I'm just wondering if there was any tweaks that, I don't know what lens from which you were looking at it, and I'm just wondering if it was more information that was being given to you, or if you had some, insight or influence into that process. Yeah.
At this juncture, I'm taking that in and not bending it too much, right? I'm kind of coming in as part of the process.
Just was a question.
Yeah.
And then with respect to the safety issues, so I understand that there's some information that the public can't be privy to, and that would have to happen in closed session. But just as an overview, in terms of what the protocol is, can you go over that in terms, as far as, okay, we know that Hopkinton had received, I had heard from a friend that Hopkinton had received a call, or there was something that happened there just the other day. From that point to when, a school goes under lockdown or something of that nature, I'm just trying to understand what the triggers are and what is the process protocol that, we can actually talk about.
Actually, I want to bring that up under, with the school committee reports, specifically to deal with that and the knowledge of the school committee about the current programs in place. So if you want to wait for that.
Okay, sure.
Okay, yeah. Happy to sort of share what I can with you. Again, I want to be careful. I'm always careful on this one just because I think some of the processes, I think, are by design kind of internal processes. But certainly, I will say at this juncture that we work really closely with local law enforcement about all the decision-making as soon as any information comes through.
Right, and that's just sort of a general overview that I'm looking for, and we can talk about at that point.
Yeah.
I think it helps to relieve a lot of anxiety on the parent side.
Yes.
Not having information doesn't help people, and I just think that if you know that you trust that there's a process in place, and obviously with the knowledge that you're able to impart onto the rest of us, but
Absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm all set, thank you.
Good evening. I'll just start by saying thank you for putting this all together. I will say I did use the SMART goal. Can't think of the exact. I remember learning here at Westborough for how to set goals, and I will say I think you did a great job. So I did just have one comment relating to the third goal. I do know that we had the opportunity to meet with your coach for the new superintendent induction program at the retreat, which is great. Very excited for you in that program. I understand it might not be appropriate to share in a public setting, but I'm sure that you are setting a lot of goals with your coach and kind of within that program. So if there was anything that might be appropriate to share, I think that'd be great for everyone to see. But everything else looked awesome.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the sort of goals for everyone who participates in that program, one thing that the Massachusetts Superintendents Association has taken very seriously is just equipping superintendents to communicate effectively during what I think they accurately describe as somewhat turbulent times. So that's a piece of the puzzle. And, often navigating challenging, difficult political situations and so forth. So that is out there. That is certainly a piece. And they really lean into the notion that we have an obligation to sort of support every student, every child, and thinking about how to put that forward and make sure that districts are committing to that notion of every single kid. Yeah.
Jakub?
Yes, thank you very much for putting it together. I appreciate that the goals are concrete.
Yes.
And measurable. I think, policy provided timeline when you expect to make progress on them, so I really appreciate that. And I think it's a feasible set of goals for the first year. Okay. My only question, I guess, is not even about the goals themselves, it's just, maybe it's more to Steve. Do we vote on these goals, or is this a proposal for the goals that we approve?
Actually, these are her goals, created for her own purpose in order to satisfy what the state requires. Obviously, we will comment as time goes on. And in the final analysis, we get to review, I guess, not only the goals, but also her response to how well she did. So that happens later in the year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks great to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you again for putting this together. I think your goals are very well chosen, especially this being your first year. I wanted to echo some earlier feedback that you said you received about AI, and I think that's a really smart thing to include, because that field is changing so quickly that even what you begin to learn, say this month, by the end of the academic year will have, changed significantly.
Something totally different by then.
Yeah. And so I think it's something that would be a very important addition to that goal.
Great, thank you. Side anecdote, my son, who's a college student, is taking an ethics of AI course right now and sent me his first fall paper today. So it's out there, it's happening, it's very much, and I had the chance to attend a webinar last year where I heard the Dean of the Sciences at Harvard essentially say that he felt that every syllabus, every curriculum that wasn't AI informed needed to be torn down and rebuilt. And those things have, the things that I've learned over the last 12 months have really stayed with me in terms of thinking about the impact this is going to have, not just on education, but on all across work sectors. So in order to both help our educators continue to work effectively with students, but also to help our students sort of prepare for what's next, it seems important, so.
And I guess my comments are, although it's brief, only 3 pages, I know how much effort there's going to be to, I guess, fulfill the obligation that you've now created for yourself in terms of this process. So again, I think as we are aware that you're on a learning curve for us.
Yes.
And therefore, your ability to perform well here has to do with everything you put in here. So I look forward, I guess, to the process, and we'll go from there.
That sounds good. And, with kind of feedback from you, feedback from the leadership team and others, I'll kind of update you as I go. If I amend the draft, I'll share that with you next time around, and then look forward to your ongoing feedback as the year goes on. So.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, we can move on to the next item, which is a discussion of the EV policy as revised. And Allison was going to speak to that initially, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I was, Sarah had pointed out to me that there seems to be a disjunct between the red line version and the version here. I had reached out to Benjamin Bowers, who's a sustainability coordinator, who said that what they were looking for was a vote on the final revised version. But it does seem possible that what we got wasn't that. I would leave it to you all to make that choice, either to vote the version that's in front of you or table it. I can go back and just ask for clarification. Either way that you want to go. I think both of those are reasonable options. I wouldn't feel like it's a great use of your time to try and parse out one thing from another, so we can pursue that if you want.
Well, I think the logical conclusion of what's before us is that the red line version should be the version that, in fact, we're going to vote on. But since the 2 copies don't seem to jive, I think before we do it, that we need to see the cleanup version and see how it compares to the red line version. Just a reminder, I guess, to the town, that the committee was presented with this policy in May, based on the memory of some here, for which we voted that version at that time. And the reason why I believe that we got the red line version is because it's a pain to try to figure out what's different between something that we already voted on and put in place versus the changes that have happened since then. So my logic would be that the red line version, when it's cleaned up, should be the new version. But I think since there's inference that, at least in my own mind, that there's one change in here that I would not accept, I'd like to make sure that that's the case. So if the committee agrees that we would ask for clarification, the fact that the red line version is the version that they would like us to vote on, and a cleaned up version of it with the proper dates on it that match what it is we've been asked to do. So that would be my motion in terms of moving forward on the ZEV policy.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0-0. Okay, moving on, preliminary budget discussion. We had the budget summit last week, I guess. And so New developments, Allison?
No new developments just yet. I think that the one thing that I wanted to do with this conversation tonight is just, you've now seen a little bit of a forecast from the school side of what we're looking at. You also had the chance to see the town's information, and it's an opportunity for me to hear from you all as representatives of the community prior to getting into the weeds of all the line items in the budget. If there are things that you feel are very important that you'd like to see reflected in our budget priorities this year, that's something, this is an opportunity for you all to weigh in for sure. One piece of news that seemed like good news, OSD, which is the organization that sets the rates for out-of-district tuition and transportation, did come in under that 5% level that I indicated in the budget summit meeting. And so I think that's good news. Now, what our sort of total costs are going to be around that tuition and transportation, we're working on that calculation. But I think, unlike in the past few years where the numbers have been very high, I think we're at a more reasonable number right now. So that's good.
But one of the things I guess I would say, just for the community's understanding, is a few meetings ago, we talked about revisiting the capital items and other items at each school. We've had one meeting to do that. We have another one tomorrow. And I think when we finish that, we'll probably have some input to the budget process in terms of maybe philosophy of where things might go. And so I think with that, the committee will be helpful, I hope, in the budget process this year in terms of how the budget gets built, with at least some ideas to deal with issues that we heard at the budget summit, as well as the impact of your discussion with the finance committee as well earlier. And so I think it's maybe premature then to have much more to say about the budget until we've had that opportunity to provide that input. So if that be the case, let's see, we've talked about the superintendent's goals, and since it's here again, is there additional information you want to
I think
add?
it rolled right from my update into I think we've done the discussion part already. I appreciate that. I think the one other kind of note on the budget process that I would say is that we are, as indicated, already working on the draft of the bus bid, and Anita has completed a portion of that. We think we're going to be able to get that out and rolling very soon. And one nice thing about that is getting those numbers back in time to really have that be part of the budget process, so it's not a volatile area for us that's not in control.
I was also going to say that I think we talked about this in different forums, but I don't know how the budget is being set up this year, if it's following the same format that it has in previous years. But I do agree that, and I would like to see more detail in some of the areas. I did like the idea of having things broken up by cost centers, so that you get a real understanding by schools. I mean, there was a lot of very good suggestions that I would say Mr. Savoy has given, and I tend to think that if we could try and focus on some of that, just so that it's clearer for the public and for ourselves when we're looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anybody else? Seeing none, okay, we can
Thank you.
move on. Citizens' requests. Is there anybody in the hall that wishes to speak to the school committee? Seeing none, we'll move on. School committee reports. Let me start with Yakub tonight.
Yes, nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, nothing to report tonight.
Nothing to report tonight.
Same, nothing to report tonight. Thank
There
you.
you go. All right, well, I'll have something to say.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Reagan?
Okay.
Tomorrow, we have no school for all the schools in the district as it's Rosh Hashanah. Fales had open house, which was a big success. And then today, they had walk to school day. So families were invited to walk to school, and they played music, passed out stickers, and had a banner for the students to sign. In Armstrong, it was also National Walk to School Day, and they had picture day yesterday. Hastings open house was a success, and then last week, all the students participated in a lesson with the principal and student services coordinators on the sound of silence. So the students had the opportunity to brainstorm and create speech bubbles on what kindness sounds like at Hastings. Mill Pond will have a 4th grade welcome dinner on October 9th, which is a Wednesday. And then yesterday, they had a Nature's Classroom Zoom call, and in 2 weeks, they're going to start grade 6 to be at Nature's Classroom. Gibbons had picture day yesterday, and they also had their universal mental health screening today. On October 8th, Assabet Valley Regional Technical School will be giving a presentation to the 8th graders. Clubs are up and running, and then 8th grade boys who want to play hockey will also have the opportunity again this year to play on the high school junior varsity team, and then more information will be out in November for tryouts and registration. And then for the high school, club registration is open and will close November 1st. October 18th is picture day. We had our cornhole tournament on last Saturday, and it was a big success. For sports, volleyball Dig Pink is going to be on Tuesday the 8th. Dig Pink raises awareness and funds to support breast cancer research. And then lastly, our homecoming week is here, so the dance is going to be on Friday the 4th, and our festival is Saturday the 5th, which is also going to have our homecoming football game, and the festival is open to the whole town. So,
Thank you. So what I wanted to say is that, the issues of safety, school safety, and how we protect the kids is obviously in the minds of many. I think for the last 2 or 3 meetings, I've asked that you put together, that is Allison put together for the benefit of the school committee, a meeting with the police and fire, if need be in an executive session, so that the committee can understand all the things that are in place in terms of how the current policies work. I know it sounds a little bit parallel to the process that you mentioned tonight, but it is unique benefit to the school committee to be able to understand what has been put in place based on other problems that we've seen in the world in past years. And I think it's very important that both police and fire have an opportunity to discuss directly with us as members of the school committee how it works. And I think that policy then and the presentation would answer Sarah's question and perhaps everybody else's too. Although it's meant to be different than what you're suggesting that we would do going forward. And I think the difference is for us to know what's here today, your process would be how to change that and make it better. And we've heard input from different quarters, if you will, in terms of things that are needed to be done. But it's certainly, and I guess what I would suggest is plan on a Thursday afternoon, maybe at 4 o'clock. The police and fire did this, I'm going to say about 5 years ago. But some things have changed, but the committee's changed since then as well. And so I look forward to, when you can schedule that so that at least we know how the kids are protected so that we can do exactly what Sarah wanted to do, which is to assure the parents that, in fact, we do have input to this process, that we do know what's going to happen, we do know how it's going to be handled, and we know how to react to, if you will, notices, not only from other towns, but also what might happen here. It's super important, and I think it's now time to get that done. So if anybody else has comments to that subject, please.
I'll just add to it. I think it was 2 years ago when we convened one, and I think it was held in executive session. And I found it was my first year on the school committee. I found it very helpful, was reassured, was able to learn the details of the protocol, which were really helpful, and then allowed me to feel more comfortable talking to the community about what steps are in place. So yeah, I really concur with the idea of doing this.
So if you could, maybe 2 Thursdays from now, something like that.
Yes, we'll see what we can.
Anybody else? Good. Okay, so at that point, anybody else have reports? We've done all the reports, I think, including Reagan. So the next discussion is action items, which is the MASC resolution report. Last week, I read I guess the summary statement of each one of the resolutions and the therefore be it resolved section. Since now the committee's had a chance to look at it, how would you like to proceed on the vote? Just call the title of the resolution and see what we want to do?
So I think what we did last year, and it was pretty effective, was to identify the ones that we can approve as a bunch so that we can just do it in one vote. And then the ones that we have
Great idea.
a challenge with, then we can
Okay.
address those.
So in
individually.
that case, what I'll do is read the resolutions through. And in this case, there are 10 resolutions that are new. There are items in what I would call Section 11, which is if you will, the revote on expiring resolutions, which are items A through K. Anyway, in my mind, A through K. And we can deal with those separately as to how you would like to do that. So I'll read the first 10. Resolution 1 is development of alternative to high-stakes MCAS tests. Resolution 2 is increase compulsory attendance age. Resolution 3 is safe storage of firearms. Resolution 4 is School Bus Stop Armed Surveillance Act and enforcement penalties. That was 4. 5 is aligning taxing authority with the required local contribution. Resolution 6 is support of the legislature to improve fiscal health of rural school districts. Resolution 7 is fully adjusting Chapter 70 aid for inflation. Resolution 8 is equitable funding for non-regional school districts with high transportation costs. Resolution 9, under vocational and technical school groups, is MSBA grants evaluation for Chapter 74. And Resolution 10 is expansion and capacity in Chapter 74 vocational technical programs. And so I guess what I would offer is a yes to support all of them, except for further discussion. Hang on a minute. Except item 2, which is increased compulsory attendance in school from 16 to 18. And so if there's discussion on any other methodology to do this, please do.
Can we maybe each suggest which resolutions we want to discuss, and then vote on the ones we don't want discussion?
Okay, that's fine.
Let me begin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I have some questions about Resolution 1, 3, and just a short question about the Resolution 7.
I would only want to have discussion on Resolution 1.
Okay, so that's question 2. Questioned as well, I should say.
I'm okay discussing the items that have already been called out, additional ones.
Tim, could you say that again, please?
I'm fine with the resolutions that we've already called out and no additional ones to discuss.
Okay. All right, on Resolution 1, discussion.
All right, so my only question here is, what I don't understand, maybe you can help me parse this. And I know this resolution, if passed, it only urges the state to develop a alternative MCAS. So it doesn't remove MCAS. So therefore, I don't understand how this would be implemented. If it's only an alternative, when would the alternative be applied, to whom? Would this impact our town or not?
Well, the quick answer is, this is the organization of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. And so, as you see somewhere in the document, it tells you who proposed it. In
This
this
is the
case,
board.
it's by the board itself, the board of directors. As is generally the case, the resolution is then directed to the legislature to answer this question, which is outstanding. Should they follow the resolution, which of course, now therefore be it resolved, Massachusetts to develop a wider, more consensus-built strategy for evaluation system with meaningful input from legislative stakeholders, which means the legislature would do it, and there's no promise that they would. That's number one. And two, you don't know what the outcome of that is, which is always dangerous. Next one is, therefore, be it further resolved that MASC urges the state legislature to launch a comprehensive evaluation to investigate the extent of biases pertaining to MCAS testing and make these results public. Obviously, they've now included a study along the lines of what they think is an issue. And therefore, be it further resolved that MASC urges Massachusetts to enact a moratorium on MCAS testing effective immediately, which means, should they do that, then we wouldn't test with MCAS anymore. But on the other hand, I think the general policy of Massachusetts is that you do have tests. That's how you evaluate the student's performance. And ultimately, there are certain requirements, which is, I guess in a general sense, what was your grade point average, which means that you passed courses that allows you to graduate. Allison, can you speak to that?
I think, this one is sort of a hot topic right now because of the ballot question. And, there's a reasonable disagreement about that out there. But, I had stated this at the budget summit. The ballot question does not take MCAS away. It removes the graduation requirement. This resolution seems broader strokes. It's urging the legislature to put a total moratorium on testing and to kind of reconceive the entire testing protocol. It's hard, Daniel can chime in as well. It's hard for me to imagine that happening, even with this passing. To be frank, I think the state is fairly invested in the notion that feedback is important for schools. So I don't feel like I'm going very far out on a limb to say it would be hard to get this by the State Board of Ed. And
yeah, one of the things that's interesting is they directed to the legislature to then, one would assume, have to order DESE to do it. That isn't going to happen. So it's a lot of words, I think. Daniel, do you have a comment on it?
I agree with you that this is probably better handled by the Department of Education and maybe the general public. I'm not sure, but I just putting a moratorium on using the MCAS is, I don't think, a good idea because it provides valuable data in terms of school performance. And so, maybe researching an alternative and then putting that in place, but putting a moratorium seems to be an aggressive, overly aggressive move.
Yeah, and logically, I think the standards in Massachusetts are quite high as compared to many other states in the union. And I think the purpose when it was created was to do just that, to be able to understand our educational system in the Commonwealth to know what was going on, not only with what the students were learning, so it's a standardized test from that point of view, but also in terms of what the quality of education was district by district, which was important because, as we know, there's an awful lot of money being spent to upgrade education in certain school districts in the Commonwealth, and there's certainly been an attempt to fix things that appear to be broken. So I think it has done well, maybe not fixed everything, but at least it's done well to point towards what should be fixed, I think, in the system. And so I think it has served the purpose. The idea, however, that a student doesn't graduate if they don't pass the test, but that's shame on us, because we should be able to fix that in 12 years' worth of education of a child in the system so they can pass the test. So if that needs to be fixed, the one, therefore, which is to, if it's broken, let's figure out how to fix it. That's the only good thing, I think, that's in this list of stuff.
I would actually agree. I think the only thing in here that I would not be supportive of would be the moratorium. I think everything else is just a conversation starter, and, you know, have at it. I think it's a good thing to be looking at potential biases in the exam. I think it's a good thing to understand how this affects the delivery of curriculum and whether it's narrowing that process and making it more difficult. I think those are worthwhile things to look into. So I'm not, if I recall correctly, because the only time I did this was last year, I think we are also able to offer an amendment to this when we vote it. Because I don't know about the rest of you, but the only piece of this that I find troubling, because I don't see them trying to throw out testing altogether. They're trying to look for an alternative, is what the proposal is. So I would be myself personally inclined to support it with the deletion of the moratorium piece.
The way I read it, though, is no different than the other resolutions, that it merely urges Massachusetts to enact a moratorium. It doesn't say, you know, it hereby requires a moratorium. So this is nothing more than, you called it a conversation starter. It's
Right,
the same.
ultimately, I think it will be anyways, but in terms of my personal support, I think that it would be dangerous to put a moratorium on an exam like this,
It doesn't put a moratorium on it.
but to urge,
It requests it, but the legislature is going to do what they're going to do anyway.
right. So, I mean, and by voting this, we're giving our support, correct? So, in supporting it. So I feel as though that is, a little bit strong, the language that they used in terms of trying to basically shut it down, or urging that districts shut it down, or that the legislature rather. So, I mean, but the rest of it, I find actually, I don't have any issues with the rest of the resolution, so.
So my biggest concern is that it's not fully defined. It's too open-ended. I don't understand this alternative. What does it mean? Alternative in terms of, are we seeking a replacement, or are we seeking an alternative for some population of the student body, which maybe I would support, but the way it's written, I do not support this resolution.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that at this point, it would be a grave mistake for them to try and put any specificity into this, because I think it's a conversation starter. I think that's what the intention is, for people to consider whether or not it holds the value that we intend it to, and whether or not that it needs to be revised, there needs to be a revision, there needs to be a new testing mechanism, or whatever. I think these types of things should go through that type of a rigorous review, and I see this as that attempt at trying to start that.
So just to let you know, the directors of MASC are the appointees to the MASC from various districts. So, and I don't know how many directors there are, but there are probably 20. Therefore, it is a cross-section of the education community of Massachusetts. more than likely, it will pass in its form no matter what we do. But on the other hand, I don't think it's going to go very far because there are vested interests at DESE and otherwise in the process that we have. And secondarily, I think any changes would take a long time to actually come to fruition. As I mentioned before, the expiring resolutions tell you what happens to many of the recommendations from the MASC to the legislature. So, Tim?
I guess I'll just make one brief comment relating to what you were saying, Yakub, regarding it being vague. I think that this does have to be taken in the context of the ballot initiative that's currently happening, and that is the biggest critique. Because if we do get rid of MCAS, what would the alternative look like? So, I think that this does have implications potentially if the ballot question were not to pass. But I think that this is also somewhat trying to get ahead of if that were to pass, what comes next. So.
And so, Reagan, you suffer under this requirement in the first place. Any comments?
No comment, and I don't mind him, guys.
That means you won out. Okay. Do you want to vote on it now, given this discussion, or do you want to wait until the end?
I'm ready to vote. I don't know.
Okay.
Anybody else?
So the discussion, I guess, is, in effect, I made a motion to put it on the table for approval. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Go
So
ahead.
are we, just to clarify, are we including Sarah's amendment? Or?
I would like to make a motion to amend it.
Okay. Problem with that is the motion has to be in writing, and it needs to be submitted, and I don't know how soon before that, but I would, since the MASC meets on the 6th of November, roughly that would be the timing. So we at least have to know verbally what your amendment would be tonight.
It would be to accept all of the entirety of the resolution with having stricken the portion of it that urges that Massachusetts enact a moratorium on MCAS testing effective immediately.
Okay, so that's the third, the third resolution on the bottom of the first column. Okay, so I think we have to vote on the amendment first. So all those who are in favor of Sarah's amendment to this, vote yea. Yakub? No? Tim? Sarah? So it's 3-2. So it is, from our perspective, it's amended by striking the third resolution. Okay, the next one is increase compulsory attendance age. And the outcome of this is that right now you can leave school at 16, and the suggestion here is that it be raised to 18. But I honestly don't know. If a person has to leave for whatever reason, I don't think we should remove that right. So I would vote against this. Anyway, is there a motion for it?
I would like to move to accept the resolution.
Okay, is there a second? Seeing none?
Sorry, I will second. Apologies.
Okay. Discussion.
Steve, could you speak to that case when that you just mentioned?
Well, the issue is simply, at least the way I read this, is that a student, and historically from, let's say the 1920s onward, kids had to go to work to support their family, and that's still the case in many cases, I think, that we're aware of. To that extent, forcing a student to stay in school when either they don't have the interest or they have a family need to leave school. Certainly everybody that I'm aware of understands the value of education, certainly in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So from that point of view, it's kind of a dire statement. On the other hand, forcing someone to stay in school when they otherwise want to leave, I don't know that does much for that person still in class. And so, like I said, I think, personally, I would leave it as it is and let each family deal with that request, whether they stay or go.
So I would say that my interpretation, I would be supportive of this because I think that the way I read it is that it's really and also I'm looking at the sponsor of this, so that's an interesting thing in terms of how I'm reading this. But I would see this as any school, whether it be vocational, or traditional, whatever the environment may be. It's only going to help to then increase the earning potential for an individual if they're able to go to some sort of training, even until 18, if it's not in school. I understand what you're saying.
Well, I'm not arguing the fact that if you stay in school, you're better off.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm just saying that there are reasons why a student at 16 wants to leave or is required to leave by family need.
Sure, and I would further state that in current times, with respect to the very vast mental health crisis that we have, I think that schools are, a safe place, and I also feel as though, we may have 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds that would not be making useful time of their time in school. So I just, just an age increase in my mind that would only increase their earning potential, so.
I have just one question. Are there any students that would be affected by this in our district, in the district history?
Yeah, our dropout rate's not very high. I mean, we're like in the 1 and 2% range, but yeah. And I know this is not the question you're asking me, but I mean, I do think that over the history of this country, we've gotten more educated as we've sort of increased the requirements for attendance. And it used to be that a high school graduation was something that, 20% of our students attained. And so by changing the age threshold by which you expect children to go to school or young adults to go to school, you're sort of raising the bar. And at the one hand, if you want to get rid of MCAS because it's like too restrictive in terms of promoting, learning, and then you're not willing to say, well, and adding on a couple of years of school, we don't want to do that either. I don't know, you're sending kind of a wrong message, I think.
State that, I'm sorry, so what are you saying?
No, I'm just saying that, our message should be that school is important and that we're not going to take away like both tests and not expect you to go for a couple more years. I mean, they're not directly interrelated in some ways, but, they are in the sense that, if we value, the longer you're in school, the more educated you're going to be as a society. We've changed that sort of requirement over time. And I think the argument that's laid out here is that, the statistics show that the longer you're in school, the better off you are in terms of your, chances of success in life.
And I think one of the key things to look at here is where it's sponsored from, because I think that when we're sitting in a town like Westborough, this is not an issue that we're dealing with in the same manner that other towns are, where the dropout rates are really high, and they're not necessarily dropping out of school to go and support their family. They're dropping out of school for the sake of dropping out of school and, probably getting themselves into trouble elsewhere. So that was a big driver in terms of the way that I read.
And if I could just chime in quickly as well, because, sorry. I will say as well that I'm very sympathetic to what Steve did raise regarding, the extenuating circumstances and the conditions that students might be in that we might not be able to understand that causes them to drop out. But I will say, while there might be a cost, at least from my perspective, I think that we do owe it to those students, especially given all the positive, implications and results from graduating that 18th year, that, we do owe it to the students to do what we can to support them to get them through high school. So that's what I would say.
So there is a motion to approve this and seconded. If we're okay, let's vote. So all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2? It's 3-2 again, but it is in favor and it is approved as written. Okay, safe storage of firearms is the next one. It's an interesting suggestion, I guess, that somehow or another a school district has something to do with firearm storage. But it is a suggestion to have the superintendent of schools create letters to the families to, in effect, request that those families store any firearms they have according to Massachusetts law. And so therefore, be it resolved, the MASC recommends all districts direct their superintendent and staff to create an appropriate communication to parents and guardians that explains the importance of secure firearm storage to protect children and teens from unauthorized access to unsecured firearms and their legal obligations consistent with Massachusetts safe storage law. Furthermore, be it resolved that MASC urges other communities to work with their local law enforcement agencies, health agencies, nonprofit organizations to collaborate and increase efforts to inform district parents and guardians of their obligations regarding secure storage of firearms in their homes and vehicles. So is there a motion?
I move to approve the resolution as it's written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's kind of obvious what the suggestion is here, and that a positive vote would require, well, let's assume that it passes at MASC, would require Allison to create the documents we're talking about. You know, there's so many things that we in the school district are responsible for. The legislature, the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, police departments, both federal and local, have this obligation. Massachusetts has the strongest firearm laws in the country. And as a matter of fact, the governor just wrote into law, again, additional responsibilities here. I don't know, I just feel that this is an overreach for a school district. For anybody with common sense doesn't need to be told by the superintendent of schools what to do with firearms, which everybody understands are dangerous. And so I'm really not in favor of suggesting this. I think it's an overreach of a school department, or for that matter, MASC, in this regard. I see nothing wrong with the request that people should secure their firearms according to Mass General Law. But having said that, whatever the wish of the committee is, so there's a motion to approve this as written. And I think there was a second, Tim?
For the third resolution or the second, sorry?
Yep.
So if I can make a comment, I just want to say I'm all for education of any kind, including this one, except I think this is best left to individual districts to figure out whether in their particular community this is a successful way of communicating with the parents, with the kids, with those families affected. I don't see this being an issue in our town as far as I am concerned, but and I agree with you, Steve. I think this is yet another to-do item for the districts, but that list is already very long. And I think there are other agencies that should take and they do take responsibility for this kind of education.
I would say that I think that a couple things. One is, in light of the, the massive school shootings that we've had, and a lot of those weapons having been accessed from, those being stored at home in light of that, as well as I don't see this as anything more than just an extension of what we send out for mental health. I think it's a very, and I would say that many people don't know what the law is. And I think that it's one extra thing, but I don't think that it's overly burdensome, I don't believe that it's overly burdensome, so I would support it.
Well, I guess I'll point out that in order to have a firearm in Massachusetts, whether it be a rifle, shotgun, or a pistol, you have to have a license to carry that firearm. You're mandated at the time that you apply for that license to understand what Mass General laws are in that regard. So to the extent that any individual, let's say parent, has a legal firearm in their possession, already knows that they're supposed to secure it with these means. We might recall that the problem with a kid in Michigan was that his parents gave him a weapon for Christmas. One in Georgia actually provided it to the kid, knowing that the kid was deranged. This doesn't deal with any of those problems. This is just a public statement of what should already be known by somebody who has a licensed firearm. However, to the extent that we wish our superintendent to be bogged down with another piece of beneficial information to a parent, a positive vote might very well require that. I forgot who, this was Brockton, I think, that suggested that. Yes,
it
no.
was Framingham.
Framingham. Oh, well, it's close at hand. So, other discussion? Steve?
I'm torn because I don't want to stand in the way of making a
Common sense?
Right, common sense. But I also take your point that this, this isn't really the purview of the school department, and yet I also take Sarah's point that it has become the purview. And so, there's a part of me that thinks, what harm is there in approving this, and the counter argument that, that it is yet another thing that the superintendent is required to do on top of all the other responsibilities that they have. So, yeah, I'm really torn by it, but I think the way I'm leaning is that we live in an era, unfortunately, where over-communicating common sense may fall on school districts to do, even though if someone has a firearms license, they're already aware of this information. But I think that spreading the word yet again, could be a reminder, given the reach that schools do have to parents.
So having spoken against it, I guess, so far in my discussion, I would say this. What's unique about this one is should the MASC vote in favor of this, that in fact, and if we vote in favor of it, then it is the obligation of the superintendent of the schools to do exactly what it said. It's not filtered going to the legislature.
I see.
It's a direct action that we, if we voted, are requiring our superintendent to do. Unfortunately, if you're negative on this, as I have been up to this point in time, the issue is someone might say, I told you so. So someone might say, I told you so, if disaster strikes, and certainly not in favor of anything like that. And so there is a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. All those in favor of the proposal? 5-0-0. 4-0. 4-1-0. I'll get it.
1-0.
And I feel for it both ways. Unfortunately, these things come out as if somehow or another the idea just doesn't get to those that need to get it. And that's the unfortunate part of this. Okay, next one is Resolution 4, School Bus Stop Arm Surveillance and Act and Enforcement Penalties. So basically, if you watch school buses, when they pull up to a stop, the arm in front off the front bumper comes out, and it basically attempts to block traffic that's on the other side of the street. And the rationale is that both sides of the street are supposed to stop so that a child can cross to the other side of the street from where the bus let the kid out of the side of the bus. There have been some articles, television articles about particularly towns closer to Boston where people don't heed what they're required to do by having a driver's license. I suspect that that they know they're supposed to stop, but they don't. It says, I think, on the back of every school bus that when you stop, when the bus stops, you're supposed to stop. So I would move in favor of this. And in fact, because the only way that the penalty can be assessed is if a policeman sees that happen. Whereas this suggestion here would be that that there be cameras put in the bus so they can actually record what happens and you can get the plate number that way. So I'm in favor of this resolution and make a motion there too. If there, hopefully there's a second.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Okay, all those in favor? 5-0-0. Excellent. Okay, the next one is aligning taxing authority with a required local contribution. The gist of this particular one lists the amount of money that the minimum required funding for school districts are, and the fact that they've increased year over year, and that the inference of this is that local communities have to cover the additional costs associated with minimum funding for schools. And in fact, we are only able to raise the tax levy by 2.5%. And since these increases are, well, the list given was 4.97, 5.58, 5.33, obviously double in most cases of over 2.5, or at least close to it. And the suggestion of this is that to the extent that the minimum funding of schools required by the Commonwealth for each community being greater than 2.5% is suggesting that the levy limit for those amount of money be allowed to cover them for whatever it turns out to be. So with that, is there discussion? So a positive vote would be to require the legislature, therefore be it resolved that Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls for the enactment of legislation that would increase a municipality's levy limit by the amount of increase of the required local contribution in excess of 2.5%, granting the municipality the ability to raise local revenues mandated by Mass General Laws, Chapter 70.
I'd like to move to approve that resolution.
Tim?
No comments, but I will second.
I thought you might say that. Anybody else? Any discussion, comment? None. Okay, all those in favor? 5-0-0. Thank you. Next one is support of legislation to improve fiscal health of rural school districts. Sponsored by Deerfield, Sunderland, Whately, and Frontier Regional School Committee. For those of you who don't know where those towns are, they aren't quite in the boondocks, but they certainly are large towns with the need to transport people and students across the district. So let's see what the resolution is. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC urges the legislature to pass comprehensive legislation encompassing all recommendations from the Legislative Commission on Fiscal Health of Rural Schools report, a sustainable future for rural schools. So it's basically saying that there should be a study to create, I guess, information associated with this particular suggestion. Is there a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 6 as written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Good. Any discussion? None. Since I know those towns, they do need this help. So all those in favor? 500, thank you. Okay, Resolution 7, fully adjusting Chapter 70 aid for inflation. And the resolution for it is, actually there's two. Therefore, it be resolved that MASC calls on the Massachusetts legislature to advance legislation mandating inflation index or catch-ups to Chapter 70 foundation aid that fully accounts for realized inflation that has occurred since the passage of the Student Opportunity Act. And be it further resolved that MASC work with the Massachusetts legislature to ensure in future years where realized inflation is above the 4.5% annual inflation cap, in subsequent years inflation index catch-ups are made to Chapter 70 aid, and that the realized inflation is used in the formulas to calculate Chapter 70 aid in perpetuity. So, I mean, as I think in the budget discussion, we talked about what happened to us based on state-sponsored special education needs where we have to send somebody out of district. And a couple of years ago, they increased the amount that we had to pay by 14%. And we got whatever the change was based on the previous article in terms of what happened. And so to me, it makes sense because many of the communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are at their levy limit. And there's no other way for them to get money except for having a voted override, which is painful. So far in this town, we haven't had to do that, even though there was discussion at the budget summit about some changes that are in the process that would perhaps increase the amount of money against the levy limit that might occur in this budget year. But to me, it makes sense. You can't just continue to expect the local taxpayer to cover the goodness of the legislature in regards to increases in various costs that we might see. So with that, is there a motion for this particular resolution?
I'll move to approve Resolution 7.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion.
Could I just ask Allison, could you chime in on this one?
Sure. So unpacking Chapter 78 is a bit of a conversation. It's essentially aid to towns based on the needs of schools. And it's based on a formula, and the formula establishes a couple things. First, a minimum threshold that the town needs to kick in to support the school district, and secondly, a kind of amount over and above that will come to the town from the state, and that formula factors in many things. It's a bit of a black box, but it includes information, sort of demographic information. The information that flows from our database about student needs to the state is factored in. I think broadly speaking, superintendents and the Superintendents Association are often advocating for two things at the state level. One is a look at this formula and adjustment of this formula, which has not been looked at for a while. And keeping up with inflation is one area broadly. But the second is changes to the circuit breaker percentage, which isn't covered here, but those are conversations that are pretty much annual conversations, and the State Superintendents Association advocates for, A, adjustments to the formula, B, just additional funding to raise the threshold, and C, circuit breaker change. So,
Thank you.
I'll just pick up on the comment of black box, because the formula has all kinds of weird things that are in it that drive how you distribute money from the total voted by the legislature. And there are things in there that cause more money to go to one town over another, even if they have the same issues, the same numbers. And obviously, it's a political process by which the money gets distributed. But I will say this, that I believe she's the chair of the Senate, Spilka, correct? She was our rep for some time ago, and she's very strong in education, and I think the distributions have been fairer since she's had that role in the legislature. So, but I think it's an admirable effort, that inflation needs to be considered in this stuff, because the distribution of money, or the value of money against things that are a municipality always increasing. People never ask for less money in salary than they had last year. I think it's admirable. Tim, comments? Okay, are we ready? So the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. 500. Thank you.
Take 8 through 10 as one. I don't think there were there any objections on 8 through 10?
No, I'll read them so that we know what the title is that we're doing. Equitable funding for non-regional school districts with high transportation costs. The next one is Resolution 9, which is MSBA grants evolution for Chapter 74. 10 is expansion in capacity in Chapter 74, vocational technical programs. And so if there is no discussion on any of those, we can vote them all together.
I move to approve resolutions 8 through 10.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? 500. Thank you. Okay, the last one are expiring resolutions, and I think, rather than go through them, because as I mentioned, there's an awful lot of them. If you look at the votes by the MSAC in past years as to how they got there. So they were voted by the MASC and moved to the legislature, and they are, in effect, currently in limbo. It's not clear what they want to do, but I think by virtue of a positive vote by school committees to, in effect, give them life again, that they would be resubmitted to the legislature, suggesting approval. And on that basis, I don't think any individual school committee is going to defeat that possibility. So I don't know how else you might want to deal with them. If you have any of them that you want to say nay to, but I think generally the history of them is that they were positively voted by the MASC in the years that are noted here, and consider the idea that we might vote them all in favor in one fell swoop. So discussion on that idea.
I have a question.
Sure.
What makes them expired? Is it that the legislature didn't act on them?
That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move to approve all of them as written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? 500, that's great. That completes the list of things for this. It's not clear what they're going to do with that, but at least we have an answer to the extent that, that they do put them up for a vote to do just that. So that is good. I think the last thing we need to do is
Approve minutes.
approve the minutes of 9/18/24. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of 9/18/24.
Is there a second?
And I'll second.
Tim, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Is Reagan opposed? Not so. Okay, 500. Very good. So there is one more motion to make and then a vote to take.
I move to adjourn.
Very good. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all.